doing in the life of this church. Well, listen, if you got your Bibles, Ecclesiastes chapter 10. Ecclesiastes chapter 10, that's where we're going to be. Listen, I've got a buddy of mine, and he's a big boy. He's 6'6", about 230. And here's the thing about big people. You know, it's kind of funny when they do things because they're big people. You know, y'all know that's true. And I can say this about my boy. Like, it's funny to watch him do normal everyday things because it's not normal for him because he's so big and the world wasn't made for people that are 6'6", you know? And so he loves to hunt and fish like I do. And we had gotten a 10-foot john boat. Another story for another day how we got it. But we had one, and we would take it to this pond. We called it our honey hole. We had found it, again, and kind of had to get through it in some weird ways. But we got there, and we were fishing, and we would catch monsters in here. I mean, this is the kind of place you go and catch a 4 or 5 pounder pretty consistently. I mean, it's awesome. We caught some 7/8s, amazing. And so we go in there, and keep in mind, now, I'm my size. I'm average to below average. He's 6'6", 230. We'd get in this 10-foot john boat. Keep in mind, he's almost as long as a john boat, okay? So he would be in the back. I would be in the front. So it was a little bit nose up, you know, but we would stand up and we would fish in this 10-foot john boat. And this is, I mean, we were pretty good at our craft. You know, you kind of spread your legs and you're good to go and you fish and kind of communicate back and forth because you don't want anybody topsy-turvy kind of falling in. And one day I was on a fish and I set the hook, and I mean, I just like, when I set, you know, because I'm not losing it. So I set that hook full speed, and as soon as I set that hook, I just hear this mammoth splash behind me. And I look around, it's my buddy, and he just sky falls. I mean, just spread eagle, not glorious, into the water, big splash. And so he's in there and he's got these big old boots on. And I'm like, dude, well, just stand up, right? Like we're in a pond and you're 6'6". And he's like, I can't touch the bottom. And so he's holding on to this john boat. And I'm like, well, I can't pull you in. I don't know how we're going to have to paddle to the side. And so, you know, I got the boat and I'm like trying to, you know, we have one paddle, by the way. That's kind of how, you know, we're doing the deal. Trying to get him over there. And I finally get him to the side and he's able to get back in. He's freezing cold. And, you know, he's got these massive boots on. And it was a sight, you know. And again, he's 6'6", so like if he would have been my size and fell in it, it wouldn't have been that funny. Now he got me later. We hit a log and I went skyfall over about 2 weeks later. But man, it's freak things like that. I got more stories about him and others, but just situations where it's like, man, you don't expect for that to happen necessarily. I mean, y'all would be like, well, you're standing up in a 10-foot john boat, you idiot. You know, like maybe you do. But we didn't expect it to happen. You know, he didn't expect one day when we were deer hunting for him to be up in his climber stand and his climber stand to break. And this dude, bare paws, slides down a tree all the way down. He hits the bottom. Next thing he knows, the tree stand starts falling, hits him on the head. And it's like, what happened? You know, I just wish I would have had a trail cam on that. This 6'6" man holding a tree, like bear pulling it down, you know. But things happen in this life. Unexpected, things that we don't expect to happen. We're in situations, it could be a freak thing like a deer stand break, or it could be an idiot like me who's setting the hook too hard and you go flying out of the boat. Or maybe it's more serious than that, right? You have a bad boss at work and so you're the one that pays the price for that. You've got coworkers that are frustrating, that eat your lunch all the time, not literally, but metaphorically, right? They bother you and you're at the mercy of kind of them and what they're going through. Or maybe you're in a situation where, man, societally, there's implications and impacts that you're facing because of the government or because of certain policies put into place, and you're paying the repercussions of decisions that other people have made. We live in a very unpredictable, uncertain world. And that's where Ecclesiastes chapter 10 is going to lead us. This is what the teacher is going to show us, is that we live in an uncertain and unpredictable world that's full of foolish people and bad rulers. And we often experience the benefits, the implications of those kind of things. And so remember, just to bring you up to speed, the teacher, if you're joining us new here, the teacher has been on this quest to find purpose, meaning, and satisfaction in life under the sun. So he's looked in various places, wisdom being one of them. But what he's been doing is he's been giving us his observations on what he's found in this quest for finding purpose, meaning, and satisfaction. And last week we left off where the teacher had expressed his frustrations with life and his grim observations of death. And so that led him to 2 observations that he gave about wisdom. By the way, this thing that he had been giving his life to. And these 2 observations in essence were, wisdom has limits. And it's good in the short term, but not in the long term, right? Wisdom is one of those things that doesn't take much to mess up a good thing. And so what he's going to do in chapter 10 is he's going to give these proverbial statements that help us see how wisdom is in fact limited. And it's limited because we live in an uncertain and unpredictable world. And so he's going to show us all of that. Now, full disclosure, we're going to work through all of chapter 10. It's a lot, okay? And it is a lot of things that he pieces together. But again, this is the beauty of when we walk through books of the Bible, we're forced to really zero in and look at things that we could just, we skip or jump over otherwise. But we're going to dive into something. It's a complex and complicated chapter. Rest at heart. I've done all the hard work for you, so you can glean from this. Next time it's your turn, okay? That's the hope. But we're going to walk through this, and then we're going to walk away with two really incredible truths that I hope is going to empower us to navigate an uncertain world, to navigate a world that seems very unpredictable with all kinds of crazy people that we encounter, okay? So that's the journey that we're going to be on today. Ecclesiastes chapter 10, we're going to jump into verse 1, and you're going to see he starts off with a doozy. I didn't make up the complexities of this. Verse 1, he says, dead flies make a perfume's oil ferment and stink. So a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. A wise person's heart goes to the right, but a fool's heart goes to the left. Even when a fool walks along the road, his heart lacks sense, and he shows everyone he is a fool. If the ruler's anger rises against you, don't leave your post, for calmness puts great offense to rest. Okay, so here's what he's getting at right here. In verse 1, he talks about how a little folly can mess up a good thing. And he gives this example, the proverbial statement of a fly in a perfume. Just as a little bitty fly can mess up an entire perfume bottle, so a little bit of folly can mess up a really good thing, or a person even walking in wisdom. In other words, it doesn't take much to spoil a good thing. And if you were here last week, you saw he alluded to that being one of his discoveries about wisdom. And so he's saying that, listen, there's plenty of foolish people in the world who could do just that. They can be the fly in the ointment. You know, that's how we say it. They can be the fly in the perfume. There's tons of foolish people that can step in and they can cause a whole lot of problems. Even if you're walking in wisdom, a foolish person could come in and they can mess everything up. You ever been there before? I have. I mean, you see people all the time, and you're like, man, why'd you have to make life so hard for me and everybody else? Because you made a bad decision, you know? And then in verse 2, the teacher says that a wise heart turns to the right, but a foolish heart turns to the left. Now, this is not political in nature, okay? So I'm gonna put you at ease. But his point is that there's two very different paths that you walk in this life. There are two very different directions in this life. There's the way of the wise and the way of the fool. And in verse 3, the teacher says this, that the way of the fool is obvious. They can't hide it. They're walking down the road and they just reek of foolishness. Like, can't nobody hide that when you're walking down the road and you're that kind of foolish. Then after that, it seems like he just addressed the fool and how you can't miss a fool walking down the road. It seems like then he goes to address the direction of the wise. And what he does is he gives a specific example when it comes to the interaction with a ruler. He says, look, if a ruler's mad, wisdom says, stay calm and respond gently. In other words, walking in wisdom is understanding that gentleness calms anger. Gentleness calms anger. So here seems to be the theme of this first section, and it's going to set up more of what he does in chapter 10. The theme is this: there's two paths in this life, the path of the wise and the path of the fool. And now the teacher, he's going to play off the contrast of these, and you're going to see where he's going to kind of come back and he'll grab the fool and he'll grab the wise. But this is the theme, and we're going to work off of themes when we get to the end of chapter 10 to make the application for, man, what do we do with all this? So these themes matter. This is the first one. There's two paths in this life. Now, in verse 5, he's going to talk about bad leadership in society and the effects it has on other people. He says, there is an evil I have seen under the sun, an error proceeding from the presence of a ruler. The fool is appointed to great heights, but the rich remain in lowly positions. I have seen slaves on horses, but princes walking on the ground like slaves. What's he talking about here? Well, what he's saying is that we live in a world where rulers make mistakes that impact society. What are those mistakes? It's rulers putting foolish people in high places and rest of the people paying the consequences. He shows us the impact of this in verse 7. This whole describing slaves riding on horses and nobles walking on foot, his point is this, that bad leadership can literally turn societies upside down. Bad leadership can turn societies upside down. We've seen this to be true all throughout life and history, which goes back to what he's told us, there is nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new under the sun. Listen, we live in an uncertain and unpredictable world where poor leaders can make bad choices and put foolish people in places that impact you and me. And for some of you right now, you're maybe a product of that. Like you're walking through something in this life that's not any fault of your own, but it's the fault of somebody else making a dumb decision that's impacted you. The teacher's going, I see you. That happens. That happens in life. Many of us, we've experienced that. Now, in verse 8, the teacher's going to go on to talking about the dangers that we face in this world. And again, what he's showing us is the limits of wisdom and the fact that we live in an uncertain and unpredictable world. Watch this, verse 8. Very logical. The one who digs a pit may fall into it. The one who breaks through the wall may be bitten by a snake. The one who quarries stone may be hurt by them. The one who splits logs may be endangered by them. If an axe is dull and one does not sharpen its edge, then one must exert more strength. However, the advantage of wisdom is that it brings success. If the snake bites before it is charmed, then there's no advantage for the charmer. I'm like, man, this is great. Take note of this. Next time you charm a snake, you get bit ahead of time? Like this is what what he's talking about is he's saying, look, work can be dangerous. Work can be dangerous. And he's in their cultural context talking about legitimate jobs that are being done there. And so he says, listen, you dig a pit, you might fall into it. Somebody's tearing down a wall and they might get bit by a snake that's hidden in the wall. A stone cutter might be cutting stone and he gets hurt by the stone that he's cutting. A woodworker might be working on wood and the very log that he's trying to craft is the thing that hurts him. Again, all of these things, very real life examples of how we live in an uncertain and unpredictable world where even work can go wrong. Accidents happen, even for skilled people who know what they're doing. The world's an unpredictable place. This is his point. I'll never forget when I was in college, I had a buddy of mine who was my teammate, and he's a freak athlete. He little bitty guy, was about 5'4", but he ran a 6'2" 60, and that's flying, like set the school record for 6'2" 60. And so in baseball, his big thing was he would bunt and he'd run it out. He would slash or he would bunt and he would beat it out to first base like it was nobody's problem. He still holds the stolen base record in North Carolina for high school. He stole more bases than anybody in history. And so this dude's flying, and so bunting was his thing. And I say that because he's an expert at his craft. And I'll never forget, we were at one inter squad, and he squares to bunt. And so he flips around, the ball comes in, and as the ball comes in, it hits just off his bat just right and hits him straight in the face, right in his eyeball, and he goes down. Freak accident. He has to medical red shirt that year. His face has never been the same since. His eyesight has been messed up. Now, he came back and was able to play, and just a really cool story from him. But I say that to say, man, the guy was an expert in his craft, and yet, out of his control, out of anybody's control, the ball hits a freak angle at just the right degree at just the right time and hits him square in the eye. Those kind of things happen. He's saying that's life. We live in this uncertain, unpredictable world where anything can happen at any time. And then in verse 10, the teacher works to further make this point when he says, listen, if your axe is dull, here's the deal. You're going to have to swing harder. But if you sharpen your axe, guess what? You don't have to work as hard. Success will come to you better if you just sharpen your axe. In other words, wisdom helps you prepare for the task and do better at accomplishing it. But then he follows it at the same time with this reality that wisdom also doesn't guarantee you success or prevent you from harm, right? You see what he's doing? He's like, hey, wisdom's a good thing. It works out most of the time. However, it doesn't guarantee you that you're going to be prevented from harm. Example, snake charmer. What do we know about a snake charmer? Well, they know what they're doing. They get the snake out and they have all the wisdom and capacity to charm that snake. However, if the snake in a freak incident bites the charmer before they can exercise the wisdom and knowledge that they know in their craft, guess what? Doesn't matter that they had any knowledge in their craft. It's the same as you and me pulling that thing out. You see his point. Things can happen at any time. Things can go wrong at any time. Again, the emphasis is on the fact that we live in an uncertain and unpredictable world where anything could go wrong. Sometimes they might go right, and yes, wisdom is a good thing, but wisdom cannot guarantee you certain outcomes. This is a repetitive drum that he's hit throughout Ecclesiastes, but he's drilling down on it again here. Now, in verse 12, he's going to circle back to the ways of the foolish and compare them to the ways of the wise. Okay, so he's working with two themes. There's the way of the wise and the way of the foolish, theme 1. Theme 2 is uncertain, unpredictable world that we live in. Okay, so he's going back to kind of theme number 1. This is what he says. The words from the mouth of the wise person are gracious, but the lips of the fool consume him. The beginning of the words from his mouth is folly, but the end of his speaking is evil madness. Yet the fool multiplies words. No one knows what will happen, and who can tell anyone what will happen after him? The struggles of fools weary them, for they don't know how to go to the city. So what's he saying here? Again, proverbial statements. He's saying in verse 12 that the wise speak graciously and gain favor, but a fool's words bring destruction on himself. And then he elaborates on the implications of that throughout the rest of the passage. He's talking about fools can't do this and they can't do that. Here's what I think the point is in light of what the teacher said. In the midst of an uncertain and unpredictable world, wisdom has power, and it's still better than foolishness, right? Because it seems that life is even more unpredictable for fools. That's what it seems like he's pointing to in this situation. He's like, a fool doesn't know what's going on. I mean, when you look at verse 12 and 14, he's like, fools got it worse than anybody. Life's already unpredictable, but for the fool, they're next level. So I think he uses that to help us see that wisdom, it can't give us purpose, meaning, and satisfaction in this life, but it's still a good thing that we need to practice. In other words, I'd say it like this. I think the point is that wisdom is a good thing. It's just not the ultimate thing. Wisdom is the good thing. It's just not the ultimate thing. In other words, what do we see? Wisdom has limits. Wisdom has limits. This is what he's been getting at. So verse 16, now the teacher's going to move on, and he's going to talk about the actions of the king and the implications that it has on other people, right? So he's been talking about rulers. Now he's talking about the king. He says, woe to you, land, where your king is a youth and your princes feast in the morning. Blessed are you, land, where your king is a son of nobles and your princes feast at the proper time for strength and not for drunkenness. His point here is that a king can either be a blessing or a curse on the people that they rule over. A king can be a blessing or a curse for the people he rule over. The type of government that exists is not ultimately in our control. But here's the deal. We're impacted by the government that's put over us, right? Whoever's ruling, we're impacted by that. So I think his point here is this is further evidence of the fact that we live in an uncertain and unpredictable world. Listen, you get a good king in your lifetime, awesome. You're going to have great stuff. You get a bad king in your lifetime, too bad, so sad. It's going to be kind of hard. Point, uncertain, unpredictable. You can't control either, right? Verse 18. It's a little bit harder. And I say harder because, man, when you get in the original language, the way that this is packaged together and translated, it gets very cumbersome. But I think what the teacher's doing here is comparing foolish laziness to diligence. Watch and see if you see the same thing. Verse 18, because of laziness, the roof caves in. And because of negligent hands, the house leaks. Verse 19, a feast is prepared for laughter, and wine makes life happy, and money is the answer for everything. Again, side note, this is his perspective under the sun. So he's looking at life at face value. And here's what I think the teacher's saying. If you're lazy, you're going to be negligent. And if you're negligent, guess what? You're going to have problems. Problems like if you don't take care of your house, the roof's going to leak. And if the roof leaks, then it's going to fall in, right? You see that? And then he says, but if you're diligent, rather than have to figure out how to fix your negligence and go back and mend your problems that you were too lazy to deal with on the front end, instead of doing that, you're taking your house and using it for what it's made for. You can host parties and have people over and have a great time, right? He's saying, listen, a diligent person isn't having to worry about fixing problems from their laziness. And so I think what we see here again is the comparison between what? The fool and the wise. The foolish and the wise. And the point that wisdom in this life is still practically better than foolishness. So he gives some practical examples of why it is better. Verse 20, the teacher closes the chapter by giving some random wisdom that I still think fits under the overarching point. Verse 20, do not curse the king, even in your thoughts, and do not curse a rich person, even in your bedroom. For a bird of the sky may carry the message, and a winged creature may report the matter. Now, this is not to prove that aliens exist with the winged creature, okay? So don't use that and be like, I think they're here. The point is what he's talking about is he's saying, listen, at any way, in any form or fashion, there can get things to people's ears that you didn't intend for them to get to their ears, all right? His point is, listen, mind your thoughts. They matter. They matter. Don't curse a rich person, even if you're alone. There's no telling if they'll find out or not. That's his point with the winged creatures, which is really talking about birds, which we know birds can't talk, but again, it's a proverbial statement, okay? Here's how I think it fits. His advice is centered around not doing something because you don't know what can happen if you do it, right? He's giving advice around this. He's like, don't do something because if you do it, man, there could be some things that could happen. I think this reveals yet again that we live in an uncertain and unpredictable world, right? This what feels like random wisdom that is good wisdom. You shouldn't talk about people. We don't want to slander people. But he's like, listen, you do it and this might happen and this might happen, this might happen. I think it's evidence to the greater theme that we live in an uncertain and unpredictable world, okay? So we've done the hard work. We made it through 20 verses. Are you with me? Did you make it through okay? All right, I told you, it was a doozy, but we worked our way through. What do we do with this? How do we take this? If we know that all scripture is God-breathed and useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness so that we'll be thoroughly equipped for every good work, what do we do with this? This is the beauty of the Bible, is that scripture always interprets scripture, and we can go and see themes here, and we can understand based on other verses and other places, man, what do we do with this? And so that's what I want to walk you through. We're going to see two things, two main themes that I've told you about. We're going to hold up those two themes, and we're going to unpack the implications for us specifically today, okay? Here's theme number one. You should be familiar, but there's two paths in this life, the path of the foolish and the path of the wise. That is the theme that we see here. There's two paths, path of the foolish and the path of the wise. Now, the teacher points out something really important and very strategic, I think, in verse 2. The teacher talks about how the path that we walk is connected with where our hearts are. He says the heart of the wise will go to the right. The heart of the wise, or a fool, will go to the left. He says the heart. He says the heart, showing that the path that we walk is in somehow connected to our hearts. In other words, family, listen, we run the risk of foolishness and foolish living when our hearts are in the wrong place. We run the risk of being fools and making foolish decisions and being some of the people that impact other people based off our bad decisions when our hearts are in the wrong place. In other words, walking in the way of the wise, it has to do fully with your heart. It has to do fully with your heart. Why? Proverbs 9:10. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. Setting your heart on God. You want to walk in the ways of the wise, you set your heart on God. How do we do this? By seeing him for who he is and what he's done for us through Christ, and then surrendering ourselves to the finished work of Jesus, embracing what Christ has done for us through his life, death, and resurrection, and letting that transform us from the inside out. That's the beginning stages of wisdom. That's the beginning stages of wisdom. Listen, there's a significant connection all throughout the Bible that shows us that our hands follow our hearts. Your hands will follow your hearts. Psalm 112, verse 1, happy is the person who fears the Lord, then watch this, taking great delight in his commands. It's the fear of the Lord, seeing God for who he is, that allows us to be able to take great delight in what he's called us to do and how he's called us to live. Because we see that God's way is the best way. God's way is the right way. God's way is a hard way, but it's the good way that we need. Jesus drives us home in Luke chapter 6, verse 45. He says, a good person produces good out of the good stored up in his heart. An evil person produces evil out of the evil stored up in his heart. For his mouth speaks from the overflow of his heart. Y'all, our hands, our mouth, our mind, our eyes, all of it is impacted by where our hearts are. Where is your heart this morning? Is your heart set on God? Or is your heart set on something else? Are you set on a career, a number in your bank account, a status level? What are you set on? Because I'm going to tell you, surefire way to walk out of here and live like a fool is to fix your eyes on anything other than Jesus. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. A foolish person will reject Jesus. But the wise person, they'll embrace him. They'll embrace him. See, the way that we ultimately walk the path of the wise is through surrendering to Jesus and allowing him to transform our hearts and lives, allowing him to shape us and show us how to live. See, the beauty of the gospel is that Jesus not only came to save us, but he came to shape us as well. And so he shapes us around who he is and what he's done. That the gospel to us means the gospel flows through us. It impacts the way that we live. That's walking in wisdom. That's what the Bible points us to over and over and over again. Here's why this is important. Y'all, we live in a world that's filled with foolish people. And those foolish people lead to unexpected outcomes for you and me. What do? Well, what we can't do is we can't control the fool. We don't even know who they are sometimes. Sometimes we do, but we don't know what they're going to do. They're like a ticking time bomb. So what do? Well, what we see when Jesus is our center point, when Jesus is us practicing wisdom, what we see is that we can't control the actions of other people, but we can control the attitudes of our heart. We control our actions and our attitude, and we do this by having the right heart posture, a posture that's rooted in Jesus, where we begin to become to others what Christ has been to us. In other words, in this unpredictable, unexpected world, we're going to deal with foolish people. How do we deal with foolish people? Well, we be to them what Christ has been to us. Jesus would draw that line for us and show us what that looks like in Matthew 5:44. He says, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. By the way, Jesus is just calling us to do what he did for us. He calls us to interact with others in light of who he's been to us. So we see the thematic reality that, y'all, there's two paths in this life, the path of the fool and the path of the wise. And what we understand based on scripture is that the path of the wise is a path where your eyes are fixed on Jesus, focused on Jesus, and shaped by Jesus. That's what it looks like. This is what Jesus has called us to. In other words, watch this. The path of the wise happens when we lift our eyes above the sun to the God over it and allow him to shape our perspective. If you've been around here for the Ecclesiastes series, the reason why that's such a big punchline is that the teacher's framework for everything that he gives us is this under the sun perspective. He's looking at life at face value. He's just calling it like he sees it. No perspective of God in the mix. It's like, here I am. This is what I see and this is what I'm experiencing. And the beauty is when we understand his perspective, we know that we've got to look beyond this life to the God over it to shape wisdom for us. He's looked everywhere. He's looked in wisdom over and over and over again. He's looked at wisdom from the standpoint of knowledge. The God above the sun shows us that wisdom is more than knowledge. It's understanding and seeing God for who he is and what he's done. Right? And so there's a beauty in this for us to understand that as we live in this world with fools and wise people, we see what it looks like to walk as the wise, but we also understand what it means to interact with fools as wise people, that we be to them what Christ has been to us. So that's theme number one. That's how we deal with theme number one. Let's look at theme number two. This one's going to hit even closer to home. The second theme that we see in Ecclesiastes 10 is that we live in an uncertain and unpredictable world. Straight up, we live in an uncertain, unpredictable world. This is not new for him, but he's doubled down in it here. Y'all, we know this to be true. You know this to be true, that this world is filled with folly and danger and flawed leaders. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of foolishness to jack up a whole lot of things. Your life, mine, other people's. This happens all the time for us. Freak accidents, bad leaders, tough political situations. All these things can affect us, make life hard, or flip life upside down. You maybe lose your job out of nowhere or know somebody that has, or the government changes policies, and so sales takes a hit because this kind of thing happened here, so you can't hit your number, and now your family's in a tough spot financially. No fault of your own, you're working your tail off. Or the market takes a dip because somebody decided to sell or do something different, right? And now all of a sudden you're financially impacted by this and you're suffering the consequences, or your company's in a challenging place. Some of y'all are in the midst of that right now. You're in a tough situation, but it's no fault of your own. Maybe it is the layoff. Maybe it is tensions at work. Maybe it's frustrations with your team. Maybe it's financial difficulties resulting from inflation or the economy, or no raises or no bonuses for whatever reason in your company or corporation. Can't sell, you can't do certain things, you feel like you're stuck because people are making decisions that are out of your control. You been there? Some of y'all are there right now. Or maybe you've just gone through a freak accident that impacted your family in a big way. Maybe it was that thing that happened, that random car or that random situation, and all of a sudden you're a product of somebody else's foolishness. This is the world that we live in. Here's my question. What do we do? How do we endure that? Like, we know this is facts. What do we do with that? Well, we have two options. You have two options with what you do with this. You can live in fear, or you can walk in faith. You can live in fear, or you can walk in faith. The facts are, we live in a world that's filled with brokenness. We live in a broken world that's been ravaged by sin. The whole reason that we experience any of the brokenness, any of the bad things that we have, is because sin entered the garden. The minute Adam and Eve chose their way over God's way, everything broke. And so we live in this fallen world. We're experiencing the realities of the fallen world. So the choice is yours. You can live in fear or walk in faith. You can fear the future. You could worry about what could happen next. When's that next shoe gonna drop? When's that next thing gonna happen? You could stress about your future. Are we gonna have enough for retirement? Is my job gonna turn the right way? Is somebody gonna make a bad decision in my company? You could lie awake at night and ask the what if questions or what could be questions, and you can't go to sleep because you're sitting there going, what this happens and what do I do here? And you're stressed to the max. You could spin your wheels overthinking, over preparing, right? Go dig a bunker somewhere and get all your meals stored up, like hoard it. I don't know. You could spin your wheels on that, or you could walk in faith. You could walk in faith. Yes, we live in an uncertain and unpredictable world. Watch this from our vantage point, under the sun. But the truth is, this world is not unpredictable and it's not uncertain to the God over the sun. The God over the sun is sovereign and he is in control of all things, and there is not one I that he doesn't dot and not one T that he doesn't cross. Not one thing is outside of his sovereign control. What we see is the impacts and implications of the broken world that we caused with our sin. And yet in the midst of that, what we see is a sovereign God that rules in the midst of all of that, that brings something beautiful out of our brokenness. And that beauty starts with our salvation, that Jesus would come down and he would live in our place and die in our place and he would raise from the dead. And in that we have hope of new life through him and the restoration that will come. The beauty of what we see when we look in faith at the sovereign God over the sun is that, man, this world ain't what it seems from our perspective. That if we can trust him with our salvation, then we can trust him with our circumstances. And that, yes, we live in the midst of brokenness, but God brings beauty through the brokenness. This is the story of the Bible over and over again. This is the story of our Savior, Matthew 1. Look at the line that Jesus came through. Ravaged brokenness. We have a God that works beauty out of the brokenness. And right now, we don't see it fully, but we wait. We wait until he comes back and he brings the restoration that he promised. And in the meantime, we hold on in hope. We hold on in hope that what Jesus purchased for us through his life, death, and resurrection is actually real and it's actually true. Y'all, the way that we walk in faith in the midst of what feels like an uncertain and unpredictable world is to have a calm confidence in a sovereign God who loved you enough to not leave you as a product of brokenness. That's the kind of God I can trust. I mean, he could have left me, but he chose to save me. You want my trust? You got it. That's the kind of God I want to trust, that would come down from heaven to do for me what I could never do for myself, to get me to a place that I never could earn or work for. That's where your confidence can be. Listen, our confidence, it's not found in our ability. It's found by looking to Christ, knowing that there's hope in the midst of what feels like an uncertain and unpredictable world. We live in this broken world. And we experience evidence of that brokenness through our feelings of uncertainty. By the way, this should expose our humanity. You see what I'm saying? Like the fact that we feel like the world is uncertain and unpredictable, and yet we know who God is, exposes just how weak we are. Exposes our human nature that we feel like, oh my gosh, because we can't control it, then everything's out of control. Yeah? And God's up there going, I got this. I had this from the jump. I put a plan in motion long before the foundations of the world. I'm not a reactive God. I'm a proactive God. Everything's happening under my sovereign rule and reign. See, the truth is that God's word points us to is that he's in full control and we can trust him. We don't have to walk in fear, that we can walk in faith. Watch this, Psalm 112, verse 7. I love this. If you're a businessman or woman, this is a passage that you should have hung up somewhere where you see it every single day. And what he's talking about the righteous man whose heart is set on God. And he says this, and I love this line. He, talking about the righteous man, will not fear bad news. His heart is confident. Why? Because he's trusting in the Lord. Because he's trusting in the Lord. Jeremiah 17, 7-8, the person who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence indeed is the Lord, is blessed. Here's the result. Verse 8, he will be like a tree planted by water. It sends out its root toward a stream. It does not fear when heat comes, and its foliage remains green. It will not worry in a year of drought or ceasing producing fruit. Do you see the connection between trusting God, and being able to be steadfast in the midst of what feels like uncertainty? And ultimately, right, the final best example of this is Jesus himself. Jesus would say in Matthew 7, 24-27, he would give this parable and he says, listen, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain fell, the rivers rose, and the wind blew and pounded that house, yet it didn't collapse because its foundation was on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and doesn't act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain fell, the rivers rose, the wind blew and pounded that house, and it collapsed. It collapsed with a great crash. Jesus says, if you hear my words and you see me for who I am, that's wisdom. You walk in that wisdom, you build your life on me, then when the storms of this life come, you will endure it. On the flip side, you choose to not make him the center of your life. You're foolish. And when the storms of this life hit, you're building your life on the sand, and you will be shaken. Things will come to a crash. You will have the instability in this life. So let me ask you this question. What foundation is your life built on right now? What are you building on? Are you building on a status, a career, a money goal? What are you building on right now? What is your foundation? Or is it Jesus? Listen, let me ask you this way. When the storms of life hit you, these things that feel uncertain and unpredictable, when they hit you, where does that leave you? Where does that leave you? Are you shook or stable? Are you shook or are you stable? Listen, when you cling to Jesus, when he's the one that your eyes are fixed on, not only are you walking as a wise person, but in the midst of what feels like an unpredictable and uncertain world, you have the ability to be steadfast, immovable. You have the ability to walk in confidence in what feels like an unpredictable world. But listen to me, if you try to build your life on anything else that you can control or fix or earn or work for, you try to build your life on anything else other than Jesus, when the storms of this life come, you won't make it through. You won't make it through. This is what Jesus shows us. I'll close with this. John 16:33. Jesus again says, I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. You will have suffering in this world. Be courageous. I've conquered the world. Jesus says, you will suffer. Not might, not maybe, you will. You will suffer. And listen, faith doesn't take away the sting of the suffering, but it gives you the ability to endure it. It will not take away the sting. You will, he uses the word suffer. It will hurt. And that faith that you have, it will not take away the sting, but it will give you the ability to endure it. Y'all, there is a hope that you can hold on to that will allow you to be steadfast in a world that seems uncertain and unpredictable. When you hold on to Jesus, you can take heart. Listen, what we do so often in an uncertain and unpredictable world, what do? We gravitate to things we feel most comfortable with. So we grab hold of money, we grab hold of status, we grab hold of success, and we're trying to hold on to those things. The problem is those things are passing away with the world. What we need in the midst of an uncertain, unpredictable world is not to hold on to worldly things. We need to hold on to the one who's overcome the world. We want to cling fast to him because in him there's a hope and a confidence. He's already conquered the world. He says, take heart, be courageous. You can make it through because of who he is and what he's done. Y'all, I'll close with this. Hope isn't found by holding on to things in this world. Hope's found by holding on to the one who's overcome the world. Hope's found by holding on to the one who's overcome the world. Listen, I don't know what you walked in here with. I don't know if you're a product of what feels like uncertainty and unexpected outcomes. I don't know if maybe you walked in here with just a missing perspective on this life. You've had a short-term view of what is an eternal reality for us. But I just want to encourage you to do work with God this morning. To ask yourself the question, where have you been building your foundation? Is your foundation built on Christ? Is he the one that you're clinging to? So I just want you to bow your heads, close your eyes for just the next couple of minutes. We're going to turn this place into a house of prayer. You know that the altar's open. I want to encourage you to put your bodies in position with what God's doing in your heart. Maybe you need to come forward this morning, get on your knees as a mark of repentance, saying, God, I need you. I've been looking to the wrong things. Yeah, I've experienced, I know that world, man, it's hard. It's unpredictable. I feel like I'm constantly a product of that, being tossed and turned in every direction, and I've been looking everywhere but to you. Or maybe you're here and you've been walking in the ways of a fool. Meaning you've been looking to the world to define you and shape you more than Christ. And this morning you need to come and you need to just open your hands and say, Jesus, I surrender. I've been looking at the wrong things. I haven't been looking to you. I want to walk in wisdom, meaning I want my eyes fixed on you. For some of you, that means surrendering your life to Christ for the very first time. There's a card in your seat back. That's just a marker for us to be able to walk with you. Take some time in the next couple moments as we sing and we pray to fill out that card. I don't know what God's doing in you, but my prayer is this morning that he would spark in us something, that he would remind us of something this morning that would motivate us as we walk out those doors and we know life is going to hit us in the mouth, that in the midst of that we can say, my anchor holds in the veil. My anchor holds in the veil because it ain't in anything that's temporary. It's in something that's eternal. It's in a God that loved me enough to die for me, to save me, to be part of his family. And he's promised me that he won't leave me hanging. Maybe you just need to remember that this morning. Father, we pray that you'd do work in this place, that you would transfer hearts, God, that you would move souls. We want to be a people that hunger and thirst for you. We know, God, we're going to walk out those doors and life is going to hit us, but when it hits us, would we cling to your truth? But we know that you don't leave us or forsake us, that you're with us. And we walk out those doors, we're not leaving you here. The beauty of the gospel is that you're with us.